My name is Michael Mogler. I'm the President of the United Federation of Teachers, and I'm standing here today with various state and city elected officials, who I will announce in a minute. And the reason for our press conference today is that we are releasing a report that outlines some very clear recommendations that we have for changes in the New York State Charter School law. The recommendations that we have in our report are what we see as things that will fulfill the promise of the law, the charter school law that was passed 10 years ago in this state. The promises inside of that law at this point we feel are not being fulfilled. And those promises are fairness for all students, true choice for all parents, accountability for all schools, and transparency on all funding. Now, fairness for all students is something we feel very, very strongly about. All students should be being serviced by all the schools in their neighborhood. And it is clear now to us, after 10 years, that that is not what is happening in the city of New York. Right here is a clear example of students with special needs, special education students. In the district schools where the charter schools currently exist, you see that the district schools have a much higher percentage of special needs students. But there's even a more troubling fact in this that is connected to this chart, in that the severity of the needs of special education students is much higher for this side, the district public schools, versus the charter public schools. So we feel that we need to somehow change the law so this stops from happening. Could you take this one? When we look at English language learner students, this is even more of a stark problem as far as we are concerned. There are 4 times the number being serviced in the neighborhood public schools versus the charter schools. And we need to make sure that all students have fair access, because the numbers are clear. 10 years later, that is not what is happening. And we need to change the law. The original intent of the law was fairness and access for all students. We know how the law is currently written. That is not happening. So those are part of the recommendations. And when we look at students with needs, free lunch students, those with the most challenging economic circumstances, it is clear once again that those are not being serviced in the same number that the traditional public schools in the neighborhoods where the charter schools are happening. And why are we standing here with the state electeds and city electeds is because we're saying we understand the original intent of the law as it was passed 10 years ago. And we are now saying, since we have 10 years of data, that it is not working. When this law was passed 10 years ago, it was clear that there was never an intent for corporations to be making profit and putting that into their pocket. And we now know that that is happening. And we are absolutely calling for the complete stopping of allowing any for-profit management companies for charter schools in New York State. When we have schools paying 25% of their operating costs to a management company, we are appalled. It is completely unacceptable. The money that we fund the schools, all of the public schools of this city with, is intended for the classroom and for the students, not for the pockets of corporations for profit. We need transparency for everything that is involved for public education inside of this city and state. And that is not something we currently have. We understood when we passed the law that that is something we thought we would have, but as I said before, the for-profit management companies, they are not open to any sort of audit ability. So we don't know what's going on. So the cases where we know about it, we know it is reprehensible. And we also are calling for a capping of fees being paid to those running charter schools. I do not believe those who voted for the charter school law 10 years ago ever intended that people running 3 or 4 charter schools would be making $300,000, $400,000, or $500,000. The people of this state are very clear. Once again, the money for public education is intended for the classroom and the students, not for someone's pocket. So those are the things we are calling for in our report, which we have issued to all of you. And we are hoping to have a very constructive conversation, because we believe that we must fulfill the promise that was intended 10 years ago. We need to have fairness for all students. We need all parents to have true choice in their neighborhoods. And we need to ensure that we are making all schools accountable in the same level. And we also need to ensure, now more than ever, that the dollars that this state intends for public education are going into the classroom. I would now like to bring up the Majority Leader of the State Senate, Mr. John Sampson.
This is a very pressing and important issue. And Mike, I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue, and all my colleagues behind me, the newly elected Comptroller of the City of New York. We understand how important education is. Education is not a privilege. Education is a right. And what Mike talked about in one word is called fact. And that is fairness, accountability, choice, and transparency. And this is what we're asking for. We as parents, but most of all, we as citizens of the state of New York, must hold them to that commitment and understand, as I said before, this is not about a privilege. This is about a right every one of our students should be entitled to. I would not be where I am if not for the public school system. We have to come back to what is fundamentally correct and fundamentally right, but most of all, morally correct. And that is giving every single student the same opportunity that I have, that you have, but even a better opportunity. You know, we talk about children. Children are 50% of the present, but 100% of the future.
I would now like to bring up the Controller of New York City, Mr. John Liu.
We have to make sure that the discussion that takes place over the next weeks and months is honest. And I have to say that the UFT has a comprehensive report, and if these numbers are correct, the disparities raise a great deal of concern. The disparities point to a lack of transparency. The disparities point to a lack of real choice. When you see so many English language learners, such a higher percentage of the schools who are non-charter schools having English language learners as compared to the percentage of the kids who are in charter schools who are English language learners, that's a problem. Same goes for the percentage of those respective schools who are special education students. That was pointed out by council members, by elected officials, by the UFT 5 years ago when we held hearings on similar subjects. Why are they still questions today? Where is the progress? So when we talk about increasing the number of charter schools or maintaining the same number of charter schools, we have to make sure that parents are in fact, and the public is in fact being given the right information.